We're diving deep today into a really tough topic.
Yeah.
One that hits close to home for a lot of us, I think.
Absolutely.
The tragic rise of stabbing crimes in the UK.
Yeah.
And the systemic failures
Right.
that often play a role in these events.
Yeah.
Recent events like the stabbings in Southport and Plymouth
Right.
really underscore just how urgent this conversation is.
Absolutely.
And the very real impact that these failures have on people's lives. You know?
Yeah, it's easy to just dismiss systemic failures as just a vague phrase, you know?
Right.
But when you look at the human cost of these events,
Yeah.
you really see just how critical it is to understand what these failures actually look like,
Right.
and how they can directly impact, your safety and the safety of your community.
Absolutely. So let's unpack that phrase a bit. What do we actually mean when we talk about systemic failures?
Think of it like this. Imagine a building with cracks in its foundation.
Okay.
You might not see those cracks right away, but they're weakening the whole structure,
Yeah.
making it vulnerable to collapse.
Oh,
Systemic failures are kind of like those cracks.
okay.
They're often hidden within institutions,
Right.
in the policies that guide them,
Yeah.
in the allocation of resources,
Right.
or even just a resistance to change when things clearly aren't working.
So how do those cracks manifest in a situation like the Southport stabbing, for instance?
Well, in that specific case, there were reports of missed opportunities for early intervention.
Right.
Perhaps there were warning signs that weren't recognized or acted
Yeah,
upon.
right.
Maybe a lack of resources for mental health services,
Yeah.
or even breakdowns in communication between different agencies.
Yeah.
That should have been working together.
Right.
Each of those represents a potential crack in the system.
And the Plymouth stabbings, those were truly horrific.
Yeah.
Did those reveal any systemic failures?
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
The perpetrator in that case had a history of concerning behavior and had even been flagged to authorities.
Wow.
So that raises serious questions about the effectiveness of the risk assessment process,
Right.
the availability of support services, and really the overall approach to preventing individuals with violent tendencies
Right.
from harming themselves or others.
It's heart-wrenching to think about how things might have been different
I know.
if those cracks hadn't existed, if those systems had been stronger.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to not just mourn the victims,
Yeah.
but to learn from these tragedies.
Yeah.
To examine those failures,
Right.
understand why they happened,
Yeah.
and work towards solutions that can prevent similar events from occurring in the future.
It's about building a system that's more resilient,
Yes.
more responsive,
Yes.
and ultimately better equipped to protect people.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea of proactive measures comes in,
Yeah.
which is, a key focus of the source material you shared.
Right.
It's about anticipating potential problems, identifying those vulnerabilities in the system,
Yeah.
and taking action to address them before another tragedy unfolds.
So instead of simply reacting to crises,
Yeah,
we're trying to get ahead of the curve.
exactly.
Where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, there are several key areas we can focus on.
Okay.
One is training.
Okay.
We need to make sure that professionals who are on the front lines, like
Yeah.
law enforcement officers,
Right.
social workers, even teachers,
Yeah.
are equipped with the skills and knowledge they need
Right.
to recognize warning signs,
Yeah.
intervene effectively,
Right.
and de-escalate potentially dangerous situations.
So you're talking about going beyond just basic training, right?
Absolutely right.
Giving them the tools, Andy, the know-how
Yes,
to use those tools in nuanced and challenging real-world scenarios.
exactly. Imagine a program that not only teaches officers how to recognize potential threats,
Okay.
but also incorporates scenario-based training
Right.
that focuses on emotional intelligence,
Okay.
de-escalation techniques,
Yeah.
and understanding the complex factors that can contribute to violence.
So it's about providing a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
Rather than just focusing on the physical aspects of law enforcement.
Precisely. And research has shown that programs like this can be incredibly effective
Right?
in reducing incidents of violence
Yeah.
and improving community safety.
That makes sense.
For example, there's a program in Scotland
Oh.
called Violence Reduction Unit
Okay.
that has seen remarkable success using a public health approach to violence prevention.
Interesting. So they're not just focusing on the symptoms,
Yeah.
they're trying to get to the heart of the problem.
Exactly. And that's what we need to be doing in the UK as well.
Okay.
Investing in these kinds of comprehensive, evidence-based programs
Right.
that address the root causes of violence
Yeah.
and equip those on the front lines with the skills they need to make a real difference.
Training is a great starting point.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are other pieces to this puzzle, right?
Absolutely.
Like what happens when those systems DO fail?
Right?
When those cracks lead to a tragedy?
Yeah,
That's where accountability comes in, doesn't it?
absolutely. And accountability isn't about punishment.
Okay.
It's about learning from mistakes
Right.
and making sure they don't happen again.
Right.
It's about having systems in place that clearly define responsibilities,
Right.
track outcomes,
Yeah.
and hold individuals and organizations accountable
Okay.
when things go wrong.
That makes sense.
Okay.
But how do you actually build those systems?
Right.
What would that look like in practice?
Well, one example is the Independent Police Complaints Commission,
Okay.
or IPCC,
Okay.
which was established in the UK
Right.
to investigate complaints against the police.
Okay.
While it's had its own challenges,
Right.
and has since been replaced by the Independent Office for Police Conduct,
Okay.
or IOPC.
Okay.
The underlying principle remains the same: to have an independent body that can scrutinize police actions,
Okay.
hold them accountable for misconduct,
Yeah.
and recommend changes to improve practices and prevent future abuses.
So it's like having a referee
Yes.
who's not afraid to call foul, even if it's against the home team.
Exactly. And that kind of independent oversight is crucial
Okay.
for building trust
Right.
and ensuring that those in positions of power are held to the highest standards.
Makes sense.
We need similar frameworks in other areas as well, like
Right.
social services
Yep.
and mental health care.
So it's about creating a culture of transparency and accountability across the board.
Yes.
Where everyone understands their role in preventing these tragedies
Yes,
and is held responsible for their actions.
precisely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of proactive measures:
Okay.
risk mitigation.
Okay.
It's about creating a safety net
Okay.
to identify potential risks
Right.
and intervene before they escalate into violence.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How do we build a safety net
Right.
for something as complex as knife crime?
It requires a multifaceted approach,
Okay.
and it starts with data.
Okay.
We need to be collecting and analyzing data on crime patterns,
Okay.
identifying hotspots,
Right.
and understanding the underlying factors
Yeah.
that contribute to violence in specific communities.
That makes sense.
This data can help us target resources more effectively
Right.
and develop interventions that address the specific needs of those communities.
Using data to inform our strategies
Yes.
and make sure we're focusing our efforts where they're most needed.
Exactly.
But data alone can't tell the whole story, can it?
Right.
What about the human element?
You're absolutely right. That's why community engagement is such a crucial piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
We need to involve the people who are most affected by these issues
Right.
in the process of finding solutions.
So it's about empowering communities
Yes,
to be part of the solution.
exactly. Imagine creating community forums
Okay.
where residents, local leaders, law enforcement officials,
Uh-huh.
and social workers
Right.
can come together to discuss the challenges they're facing,
Yeah.
share information,
Okay.
and work collaboratively to develop solutions.
It's about building those bridges between institutions and the communities they serve,
Exactly.
fostering a sense of shared responsibility
Yes.
for safety and well-being.
Precisely. And it's also about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
What works in one community
Yeah.
might not work in another. So we need to be flexible,
go
adaptable, and willing to try different approaches until we find what works.
It sounds like we're talking about a major shift
Yeah.
in how we think about and approach these issues,
Yes.
moving away from reactive measures
Yeah.
towards a more proactive,
Exactly.
preventative approach that involves the whole community.
Absolutely.
But let's be honest. A lot of this depends on government action, right?
Yeah.
On policies and funding decisions that can either support or hinder these efforts.
You're absolutely right. The government plays a crucial role
Right.
in shaping the systems that impact public safety.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to talk about government transparency,
Okay.
which is another key focus of the source material you've shared.
Why?
Transparency is essential
Right.
for holding those in power accountable
Yeah.
and ensuring that policies and resources are actually addressing the problem.
Okay, let's dive into that.
Okay.
What does government transparency look like in practice?
Well, the source material lays out several concrete steps the government can take
Right.
to improve transparency.
Yeah.
And we'll explore those in detail in the next part of our deep dive.
This is already giving me a lot to think about.
Good.
You ready to unpack those steps in part 2?
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to explore how government transparency can play a vital role in addressing the issue of knife crime in the UK.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of government transparency
Right.
in addressing this whole issue of knife crime.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to think of transparency as just about access to information.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
It feels like transparency is really the foundation
Yeah,
for so many of these other solutions
absolutely.
that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
like accountability and community engagement.
Right.
If you don't know what's happening, how can you hold anyone accountable?
Exactly.
Or even begin to address the problem?
You can't. Transparency builds trust.
Yeah.
And trust is essential for any kind of effective collaboration
Yeah.
or problem solving.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the specific steps then
Okay.
that the UK government can take
Okay.
to increase transparency around knife crime.
Well, the first step is mandatory reporting and data sharing.
Okay.
This means requiring all government departments and agencies
Right.
involved in this issue, from law enforcement to social services,
Right.
to publicly report data on knife crime statistics,
Okay.
the outcomes of interventions,
Yeah.
and even how funding is being allocated.
And not just tucked away in some obscure government report, right?
Right.
This information needs to be accessible to the public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Regularly updated
Yeah,
and presented in a way that's understandable.
absolutely. Imagine like a user-friendly online portal
Exactly.
where you could find up-to-date information on knife crime rates in your area,
Yeah.
the types of interventions being implemented,
Right.
and the results they're achieving.
Exactly.
That way you could see how your tax dollars are being spent,
Yes.
how effective those programs are,
Uh-huh.
and hold those in power accountable for making progress.
Absolutely. It would also empower communities
Right.
to be more informed and engaged.
Right, to have a better understanding of the challenges
Yes.
and be part of the solution.
Exactly. Transparency empowers everyone.
Right.
And it's not just about raw data either.
Right.
It's also about being open about the decision-making process,
Yeah.
about the rationale behind policies,
Okay.
and how those decisions are impacting communities.
So it's about making the government more accountable
Yes.
to the people it serves.
Precisely. And that brings us to the next step.
Good.
Establishing independent oversight bodies.
Okay.
These are independent organizations separate from the government
Okay.
that can monitor the actions, the decisions, and the spending
Okay.
related to public safety and crime prevention.
So they're kind of like watchdogs, making sure the government's playing by the rules.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
These oversight bodies would have the power to investigate complaints,
Okay.
audit programs, and even recommend changes to policies or practices.
Okay.
They would be free from political interference
Right.
and could act as a truly independent voice,
Yeah.
advocating for the best interests of the public.
That sounds pretty powerful.
It is.
But wouldn't these oversight bodies face their own challenges?
Of course.
I mean, who oversees the overseers?
That's a valid question. To maintain their effectiveness and credibility,
Right.
these oversight bodies would need to be transparent in their own operations.
Okay.
Their findings, their reports, and their recommendations should be made public,
Okay.
and they should be subject to regular audits themselves.
Checks and balances all around. I like it. What else is on the list?
Another important step is the creation of community engagement forums.
Okay.
These would be regular meetings or online platforms
So,
where residents can directly engage with policymakers and law enforcement officials
right.
to voice their concerns,
Right.
share their experiences,
Yeah.
and provide input on strategies
Okay.
to address knife crime.
This sounds like giving the power back to the people
Yes.
who are most impacted by these issues.
Exactly. Imagine regular town hall meetings
Okay.
specifically focused on knife crime,
Okay.
where residents can directly question police chiefs,
Right.
social workers, and elected officials.
Ah.
They could share their experiences,
Right.
offer suggestions,
Yeah.
and hold those in power accountable for taking action.
It would also help break down those barriers
Absolutely.
between institutions and communities.
Yes.
Fostering a more collaborative approach
Exactly.
to problem solving.
And it's about recognizing that the people who live in these communities
Yeah?
often have the most valuable insights
Good.
into the challenges they face
Yeah.
and the solutions that might work best.
So it's not just about top-down solutions.
No.
It's about listening to the people on the ground
Exactly.
and working together to create change.
Precisely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of transparency,
Okay.
protecting those who speak truth to power,
Okay.
even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
We need strong whistleblower protections.
That makes sense. If someone sees something wrong,
Yes.
they need to be able to report it
Right.
without fear of retaliation.
Yeah.
But whistleblowing can be risky, can't?
It can.
What if someone speaks out and then faces consequences?
You're right. That's why robust whistleblower protections are so essential.
Okay.
These protections would need to include safeguards against retaliation,
Yeah.
such as anonymity,
Okay.
legal representation, and even financial support
Wow.
if someone loses their job as a result of speaking out.
So it's about creating a system where people feel safe to come forward,
Yes.
knowing they'll be protected
Yes,
and their voices will be heard.
exactly. And remember, whistleblowers are often the ones who expose corruption,
Yeah.
misconduct, or even systemic failures
Right.
that would otherwise remain hidden.
Right. They play a vital role
They do.
in holding institutions accountable
Yeah,
and driving positive change.
absolutely.
So protecting whistleblowers is not just about protecting individuals.
Right.
It's about protecting the integrity of the system itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about money. Transparency in government funding is absolutely crucial
Yeah.
when it comes to addressing a complex issue like knife crime.
Right.
The government should be required to clearly disclose
Oh, okay.
how funds allocated for crime prevention and community safety
Right.
are being spent.
So you're talking about making the budget process more transparent
Exactly.
so the public can see exactly where the money is going
Yes.
and how it's being used.
Imagine an online platform
Okay.
where you could see a breakdown of the budget for knife crime prevention
Okay.
with details on how much is being allocated to law enforcement,
Oh.
social services,
Yeah.
community programs,
Right.
and other initiatives.
Right. And you can see how much is being spent on prevention versus enforcement.
Exactly.
How much is going to different regions.
Yes.
And even track the outcomes of those investments.
Absolutely.
That would be a game changer.
It would.
It would allow people to hold the government accountable
Yes.
for spending those funds effectively and efficiently.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it would also help identify areas
Right.
where funding might be lacking or misallocated.
Right. If you see, for example, that the vast majority of the budget
Yes.
is going towards law enforcement,
Right.
with very little going to community programs
Right.
or early intervention efforts,
Exactly.
that raises questions about whether the government is truly committed
Yeah.
to a holistic approach to this issue.
Absolutely.
It's about ensuring that the government's actions
Yeah.
align with its stated priorities.
Exactly. And to really close the loop on transparency,
Okay.
we need independent audits of government programs
Okay.
addressing knife crime.
Okay.
These audits should be conducted by external organizations,
Okay.
free from any conflict of interest,
Right.
and their findings should be made public.
So it's like having a financial expert come in
Yes,
and double check the government's homework,
exactly.
making sure the money is being spent wisely
Yes.
and achieving the intended results.
That's a great way to put it. These audits can identify inefficiencies,
Right.
expose potential corruption, and provide valuable recommendations for improvement.
Okay.
And making those findings public
Right.
ensures that the government is held accountable for its action and that any problems are brought to light.
All of these steps, from mandatory reporting to independent audits,
Yeah,
it really points to a larger shift in how we think about government.
it does.
It's about moving away from a culture of secrecy
Yes,
and towards a more open and accountable and responsive system.
you're absolutely right. And that shift is essential.
Yeah,
If we want to make real progress on complex issues like knife crime,
absolutely.
it's about building trust,
right.
empowering communities,
Yeah.
and ensuring that those in positions of power are held accountable for
that-
their actions.
This conversation has given me a lot to think about.
Good.
It feels like we've been focusing on the big picture,
Right.
on these large-scale systemic changes. But what about the individual?
Yeah.
What role do we play in all of this?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We'll be right back to discuss how even small actions can contribute to building a safer and more just society. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back
Yeah.
and ready to tackle that big question.
Right.
We left you with, what can we as individuals
Right.
do to address this really complex issue of knife crime in the UK?
Right.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed
Yeah.
when we think about the scale of this problem, you know?
Right.
Like, are actions even going to make a difference?
I understand that feeling.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that systems are made up of people.
Oh.
And people can change.
Right.
And even small actions,
Yeah.
when multiplied by thousands,
Yeah.
can create this ripple effect
Okay.
that leads to real lasting change.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about those iconic moments in history,
Yeah.
movements that transformed societies. They all started with individuals who dared to believe that a better world was possible.
Right.
And they took action to make it happen.
So you're saying we shouldn't underestimate the power of individual action?
Absolutely not.
But what does that actually look like
Right.
in practice? Give us some concrete examples.
Okay.
What can we actually do?
Okay, well, first and foremost,
Yeah.
educate yourself.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
Right.
but it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Dive deeper into the issues that resonate with you.
Okay.
Whether it's police reform,
Uh-huh.
youth outreach programs,
Right.
or government transparency.
Yeah.
Read articles,
Oh.
listen to podcasts,
Yeah.
attend community meetings.
Okay.
The more you understand the complexities of this issue,
Yeah.
the better equipped you'll be to advocate for meaningful change.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly.
The more we understand, the more empowered we are to take action.
Absolutely. And once you've armed yourself with knowledge, use your voice.
Okay.
Talk to your friends and family about these issues.
Okay.
Share what you've learned, spark those conversations, write to your local representatives demanding action and accountability.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working on the ground to address knife crime,
Okay.
whether it's through volunteering your time
Yeah.
or donating to their cause.
So it's about raising awareness,
Yeah,
keeping the pressure on those in power,
exactly.
letting them know that this is an issue that we care about.
Yes.
And that we won't let them ignore.
Absolutely.
Right.
And don't underestimate the power of your vote.
Right.
When election time rolls around, research the candidates' positions on crime prevention,
Okay.
community safety,
Uh-huh.
and justice reform.
Right. Make informed choices.
Yes.
Hold our elected officials accountable for
Yeah.
their promises.
But what about those of us who want to get more directly involved, who
Yeah.
want to make a difference on the ground level?
Exactly.
Well, there's so many ways to do that. Okay.
Volunteer your time at a local youth center.
Okay.
Mentor a young person.
Uh-huh.
Get involved in community initiatives that are working to address the root causes of violence.
Right. Creating a sense of community,
Yeah.
belonging, and opportunity
Absolutely.
can be incredibly powerful in preventing young people from turning to crime.
It really can.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most powerful action
Yeah.
can be the simplest one.
What's that?
Listening.
Oh, wow.
Take the time to listen to the experiences
Okay.
of those affected by knife crime.
Right.
Those who live in communities
Yeah.
where this is a daily reality.
Yeah.
Their stories
Yeah.
can offer invaluable insights into the challenges,
Right.
the fears,
Uh-huh.
and the hopes
Okay.
of those living on the front lines of this issue.
Empathy is a powerful tool for understanding.
It is.
When we truly listen to and connect with
Yeah,
the experiences of others, it can really change our perspective
absolutely.
and inspire us to take action.
And remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay.
There will be setbacks,
Yeah.
frustrations,
Right.
moments where you might feel like giving up.
I can imagine that.
But it's in those moments that we need to remember why we're fighting,
Right.
who we're fighting for,
Yeah.
and hold on to that hope for a better future.
Because even small actions,
Yes.
when multiplied by thousands, can create a tidal wave of change.
Exactly.
It's like that Margaret Mead quote.
Oh, yeah.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does.
That's beautiful.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we leave you with this question. What will you do to contribute to building a safer, more just,
Yeah.
and compassionate society?
It's up to all of us.
Remember, even small actions can make a difference. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and stay tuned for our next deep dive.